The media gone wild. The government's got to control it. The government regulates the media just like it does any other business. The media has to follow certain government rules, and if they break those rules, the government fines them, just like any other business. Now that started in 1934 with the establishment of the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC was established in the Communications Act of 1934 during World War II, so the United States government could control the media more than they currently were. And it was also part of the second round of New Deal legislation. The FCC is an independent regulatory agency. And an independent regulatory agency has a job of regulating some part of economic activity, just like the FEC regulates campaign financing and campaign activity. Okay. One thing that the FCC is responsible for doing is licensing. If you want to be on air, broadcast or cable, radio, whatever, you have to have a license, which means you are then issued call letters. That's where WVEC comes from, or WAVY, WAVY. Those are call letters, and you cannot operate without them. Some radio stations try to operate without a license, and those are called pirate radio stations. There, one thing that the FCC has had the job to do is make sure that conglomerates or chains aren't dominating the market. So the FCC in the past has been responsible for protecting competition within media, making sure that there's a lot of different people giving us different sources of information. But the Telecommunications Act of 1996, part of it was to also create competition in telephone markets too. But since 1966, the law's been relaxed, which means not enforced as well. So we still see a lot of conglomerates. But you do see a little, because of that, you see more cross ownership, and cross ownership is another way to say cross ownership chains. Somebody who owns a newspaper owns a radio station, owns a news network or TV network. One thing the FCC does is enforce these rules. These are the major rules. All broadcast stations must include children's programming in order to keep their license. And that's like Saturday morning cartoons. That's why we used to have Saturday morning cartoons. That was how the television stations were able to fit in all of their children's programming in order to keep their license. Okay. Of course, you ban obscenity, and that's your lewd speech, your nudity, your excessive amounts of violence. You can't do that. The FCC enforces those rules. So when Justin Timberlake tried to strip Janet Jackson during the Super Bowl, CBS got fined because that was obscene. Equal access. The broadcast media must give all candidates running for political office the same opportunity to be heard. So equal access rule means that if one politician goes on air, I know better than that. Sorry. If one politician goes on air, you must invite their competitor. And that relates to right of rebuttal. Now, right of rebuttal means that the FCC gives individuals the right to have an opportunity to respond to any personal attacks made against their character. So if y'all were to go on Wavy TV 10 and slam me as one of the worst screencast-o-matic teachers on the face of the planet, I have the right to go into Wavy TV 10 the next day and tell them, when I record these videos, I'm really stinking tired and I do my best. Okay, so you get to rebut or counterattack an argument. Fairness doctrine. Fairness doctrine no longer exists. And that's why the media has been criticized for being liberal. So in the 1940s, the Fairness Doctrine was passed where the FCC made sure that media presented several points of view in order to ensure balanced coverage. It was eliminated in 1987, ironically by Republicans that pushed that through Congress. And since 1987, what you do see is that media has become more left-leaning, meaning that naturally when reporting, the media is going to sound more liberal. Okay. And that's, again, why Rupert Murdoch established Fox News to kind of counteract that. Rules of the profession. Any of y'all who want to be journalists, this is going to be good for you to know. There are a couple of different rules if you want to be a journalist that you must follow. If somebody wants to talk to you on the record, everything that is said can be quoted and recorded. Alright, so all said, all reported. That's the best kind of stuff right there. Because there's no question about where you got your information. Okay. Off the record, information is provided to inform a decision or provide a confidential explanation, but not for publication. So if I wanted to call, let's see, who would I actually call? If I wanted to call my representative Bobby Scott as a journalist and ask him, what do you think about the Affordable Health Care Act implementation, the rollout of the healthcare exchange websites? He could say, on the record, I supported the law. I think we need to keep on trying it. Massachusetts, when they did the same thing, not that many people signed up at first. And then he would say, but off the record, I don't have any hope. Like, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that this isn't going to get reversed in 2016 when Chris Christie becomes president. So he doesn't want you to report that he said that, but he's giving you further explanation. But don't publish it. On background, when you brief an official, it can be reported, so you can actually like this, you could say the source, and you say, and the source would be characterized in general terms, like a government insider, somebody within the White House, somebody with connections to Barack Obama said. Okay, so you can't use direct quotes, and you can't use anybody's name, but on background, you can use a source. On deep background, it's very much like off the record. Most journalists would understand deep background to mean that the information may not be included in the article, but it is used by the journalist to enhance their view of the subject matter or to act as a guide to other leads or sources. So deep background would be exactly like what Deep Throat was. And again, that's because he had a lot to say, but you couldn't quote him, you couldn't even use on background, you couldn't say White House sources. Basically, Deep Throat was giving Woodward and Bernstein information that they would later use or information that they would later report with sources and with proof. You are protected by the First Amendment, of course, freedom of press, and we're going to get into the First Amendment a lot later about prior restraint, what can and cannot be withheld, and malice, and slander, and libel, but for the most part, you know, reporters' privilege is protected by the First Amendment. Last but not least are shield laws. Shield laws are a reporter's privilege to refuse when subpoenaed to reveal their sources. So if a journalist is asked to testify in a court case and their source would help the prosecution solve a crime, but they're worried about revealing the source, they can, they can plead the fifth because their journalists are protected by shield laws. The reason why journalists don't want to reveal their sources is because if you are a journalist that reveals your sources, then nobody's going to ever give you information again. So that's key. If you want to be a good journalist, you have to keep your sources close to your chest without looking like a rat, because then you'll basically become a non-effective journalist. Okay, don't quite know what's being recorded, so I'm going to stop here.